We'll now call to order the May 2nd meeting of the Stillwater Planning Commission. It will be the process this evening to call for items on the agenda. The commission will hear briefly from staff first, then the applicant and or their representative. Then we will open a public hearing and hear from those in favor and or in opposition of the request. When you come to the podium, please clearly state your name and address for the record. And before closing the public hearing, both staff, applicant, and or their representative will be provided an opportunity to respond, to provide additional information and answer questions. After all interested parties have spoken, the public hearing will be closed, and we will hear closing remarks and alternatives from staff. With that, the first item on the agenda this evening is a specific use permit, SUP 23-02.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Diana Hood. I'm the Associate City Planner. And as was just stated, our first item for tonight is a specific use permit for a public safety radio communications tower at the address 4220 North Perkins Road. This is an area map of the subject property. It is located along North Perkins Road at the north end of Boomer Lake Park. Here is an aerial view of the property. Parkview Estates is located just to the north, and USA Rare Earth is located to the east. The subject property is zoned public with similar zoning to the south, general industrial to the east, and small lot single-family residential to the north and west. I will let our Emergency Management Director, Rob Hill, come up and talk more about the project.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for hearing us this evening. If I could, before we get started, I'd like to introduce a couple members of my team that are here tonight that will help answer questions as we go through. So I have my Deputy Director, Brendan Pope, if you just raise your hand. Stan Shook, who is with Motorola, who we've contracted with through this project. Then Harmony Clark-Ryder, who is with Intertech, who is a subcontractor through Motorola. And then Mr. Kevin, who is with Miss Harmony. So this evening, as we go through this process, they'll be answering questions and giving you information as well. A little backstory on the project. In December of 2021, City Council approved a new public safety radio system totaling $6.75 million. This system was for law enforcement, fire, emergency management, and at the time specifically for the city of Stillwater. The system was originally part of a county-wide radio system. The new system replaced 5 independent radio systems with one of the provisions for 2 backup sites. So we would not completely get rid of what we currently have. We will maintain 2 backups as a fail-safe. What this will do for the city of Stillwater and public safety is brings true interoperability to law enforcement. So fire, emergency management, and police, they can all talk to each other using the same radio system, whereas now they have to utilize one of the 5 other systems, and it's very expensive to keep the radios in all the vehicles and portables. It allows us to be part of a statewide radio system, which is receiving support from other communities during times of disasters or special events, and providing support to other communities. So, for example, Shawnee, last week we saw where they had a large damaging tornado. We would be able to simply pack up, take our equipment, and go down there and be able to participate in their emergency response, as well as they would be able to reciprocate should we need. Payne County has approved recently their $13.7 million project, which will allow the public safety in the county, and the city's system will be part of that master system now. So that's another integral part of this system. This will be crucial, again, to emergency responses within our city, our county, and now the state. On July 2022, we were contacted by Altice, or Suddenlink Optimum, about the tower and their intentions to decommission that by the end of 2022. CMO, City Manager's Office, and staff met with Altice, and we received an extension through May of 2023. Because of this decommissioning and having to relocate assets that were currently on that tower as part of our agreement with them, it forced us to relocate Stillwater Police Department, and they had 2 systems on that site: Stillwater Fire Department, Emergency Management, Payne County Emergency Management, OK Fire 1, which is an interoperable channel for fire mutual aid, the Payne County Sheriff's Office, and then the electric utility and LifeNet ambulance. As you can see, we were pretty well migrated onto that site, using that as our primary source of communications. To date, all the systems but one have been relocated, and that will be done sometime later this month. Payne County Sheriff's Office was allowed an extension to June 1st because they are going to a tower at the Expo Center. So we have basically stripped every piece of public safety communications that we've had on that tower and relocated it to another alternate location, whether it be a water tower, Boomer Lake Station, somewhere like those locations. I know I'm putting a lot of information out here, so please stop me as I go through. If you have questions, please feel free to just stop and ask.
If they decommissioned the tower, was not usable.
It is not. It failed 2 tests. The integrity test, they failed. So just to give you an idea, 100-mile-an-hour wind for 15 minutes with 1-inch ice loading, and the tower would not pass. It was at or over capacity. One test had it at 123% capacity. Another test had it at 146% capacity. And we actually, every time we place something on the tower, we would have a tower study done, so to make sure that we were not overloading the tower. The tower's age, decomposition over the years, that's what landed the tower into the failing state. And there is no interest by Altice to rebuild another tower. They don't need it. They are going mostly internet-provided television. And I think, if I recall right, they were only using this tower to receive the religious channels. And so they have cut back on the number of channels that they provide. So they're just receiving everything basically over the internet. So they're going to decommission the tower and take the tower down because of the liability aspect. So we met with the property owners for a potential lease on the same property where the Altice Tower or the Suddenlink Tower was located at 1000 South Stallard. And honestly, they were really more interested in selling us the property versus letting us take out another lease. They were not interested in an additional lease. This turned out not to be in our favor, right? We worked with them, we met with them several different times, and basically they wanted $5 million for 70 acres of property, and they told us, then if you owned the property, you can do whatever you want to with it, but it was not in our best interest. So we terminated negotiations and other alternatives were sought. We tried to find a site close to the original due to the propagation studies that had been conducted, that had FAA approval, FCC approval, and telecommunications capabilities that were in that area that we had already come to look for. We looked at 2 sites in North Couch. Both sites were in the floodplain and required significant constructions to elevate out of floodplain. I know you guys are a lot more aware of this than I am. I really got an education, right? Anything that you bring in, you got to take out. So these proved not to be the best options for us. We actually looked in Couch Park in the main body, and it was determined that we had no fall zone, no safety zone, and we'll cover a little bit of that here in a little bit. We looked at the area where the Hamilton Field used to be located, and thought that this was going to be the home of our new communications tower, only to find out that all of the park property in the city is entered into that Land Water Conservation Fund, and we would have to petition to have that section of park property removed, and that would take approximately 3 years to do. So that was not a feasible option for us as well. So this would restrict us from using any park property for the construction of a new site, and most of the city-owned properties in floodplain or floodway, and is subject to some sort of flooding. So I want to show you ever so briefly right here. This is Couch Park, Can you see my mouse on the screen? Okay. This is the original site at Suddenlink, what we call the Suddenlink Tower. And these were the alternate sites that we looked. Oh, no, you can't see my mouse. Okay. So the right image. The dark area, the area with a dark circle around it, is the original site that we wanted to use when this project was approved. The two blue X's are where we petitioned the property owner to get a lease. So the left image is just a blown up image of the existing site, and then the two blue X's in the right image are where we petitioned the property owner. Again, all of which failed because they wanted to sell us the property, not lease it. So here is a couple more images. This will be what we call in North Couch or Hoyt Grove Park. These were some areas that we looked at. These also are in floodplain, but they are also in an area where they do not have a good fall zone. So these were quickly eliminated as possibilities. The top image is where Hamilton Field used to be, where the old football field used to be for the Stillwater Pioneers. That's where we thought we were going to actually land, and it was an awesome site for us. It just didn't make because that property was entered into the Land Water Conservation Fund. And then below that image is the tip of Couch Park in that far southeast corner. We wanted to look at something like that just to see if that was even feasible, and of course it wasn't feasible as well. All right. So through the discovery phase for each potential location, it was later determined that all the park property had been entered into the LWCF, and this would keep us from using anything park related. After an exhaustive search, we were able to locate one of the last pieces of publicly zoned property north of Stillwater, and that is for tonight for your SUP that we have before you this evening. This property is not park property. It is one of the last remaining properties the city owns that would allow for this type of project or construction and zone public. And it is not in any type of a flood area. Now there is flood area around it because the lake is adjacent to it to the west, but it is not actually in flood. So we were very excited when we found this location. And again, that is an image that Diana showed you at the very beginning. So here is Parkview Estates to the north, and then the new guide tower with the blue cross, the blue circle. That is in a very approximate location of where we want to put the tower. All right. I know I have shared a lot of information. Do you have any questions of me and the staff at the moment?
I have
Sir.
a question. Did
Yeah.
I read the papers you gave us to understand that it's 420 feet above ground level? That's the height of the tower?
Yes.
When you evaluated this, were there any, say, cons or anything negative about this site that you had to?
Not that I'm aware of. Harmony, do you know of anything that was negative regarding this site, this location?
Okay.
I'm sorry, can you come to the
Yeah.
podium?
Well,
please?
just about every proposal has pluses and negatives. And
Well, I will
was
say
curious
this.
if there were any negatives with this that you had to think
Yes. The one big negative is the
Hmm.
sheer cost.
about. Oh,
Is the cost.
it's going to be more expensive to put it there.
It is just expensive in the fact that what we were planning to do originally in the project was to do remediation on the current tower that we were on,
Okay.
and now we are having to build from scratch a tower.
Mhm.
So we took all of our contingency funds, all of our remediation funds, and they have been refocused to building this tower. So the biggest con that I can think of is the
It's
cost.
going to be a cost.
Yeah.
Where will the power come from?
So
Or
the
is
power
that
will
important?
come. I don't know how to show you my map on here.
I know
with the
there
mouse,
is a
but
power station very close.
there is. We will not use that. It only requires 110, 240.
Oh,
So what would happen is there is a rendering that the electric department has shared, and the power will actually come from the same location. They will put in a transformer just south of those houses that you see at Parkview Estates right there. They will run it underground along the road easement and to the site.
Mm, okay.
That's where the power will come from. And yes. Yeah, if you don't, yeah. And then we'll zoom in here. Yeah, just zoom in. So here is the exhibit that gets into more detail. So you can see Cami Oak Trail is here to the east. We would have an access road that would come into here, that would come down, and this is the same area that the power would traverse. So we would have very limited disruption to the property, and then we would come in here to this bulkhead, and then this is where the tower would actually sit.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
We would be very happy after the public hearing to come back and address any concerns that are brought up as a result of the public hearing, and any more questions that you may come up with while you think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll open the public hearing, and I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item to please come forward. Seeing none, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of this item. Sir, if you just come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
Not really in opposition, but just concerns. My name is Samir Ahmed.
Can you speak into the microphone? Maybe we need to pull a little closer.
My name is Samir Ahmed. I'm a professor of civil and environmental engineering at OSU, and I live in Parkview Estates.
Could you give
That's-
us your address, please, sir?
My address is 207 East Rogers Drive.
Thank you, sir.
It's the closest to the proposed location that you all sent to me. This dot here. North of it, you have Davis Court.
Yes, sir.
The south part of Rogers Drive, at the intersection of Davis and Rogers Drive, is where I live.
Yes, sir.
So I measure distances. I am the closest. The plus two houses, one to the right, one to the left. So there are three of us. So that's the motive I'm here today.
Yes, sir.
I'm not against the tower. I understand its importance, and that have been very well explained. I am against of having the tower at that particular point, given that it's close to residences. I compiled some information, and with your permission, I can submit it. The impacts of towers and cell communications on health, etc., is well documented, and it's controversial. Part of that controversy is that the funding for these studies and the body of knowledge that's available is funded by telecommunications industry. If you fund my project, I am forced to listen to you. You see what I mean? So I am here just to request, if possible, that the tower can be moved a little bit far from the residences. The nearest minimum, or not the nearest, the minimum documented distance I have sent, and it's available here, they say 500 meters. That's about 1,650 feet. The other concern I have is that how are we going to service this tower? If there is a problem, how we are going to get trucks there? There's got to be a service road. As you have heard, there is already a power station with excellent service road and the gate. Having that tower as close as it gets to the existing power station definitely will save on the cost of a new road. And the power will be easier to get instead of routing it from houses, etc. And it is disturbing of properties, even though you are trying to minimize it. So servicing the tower is a concern. It's not the cheapest. It can save you money if you consider what I'm saying. The height of the tower, the power used, the frequency of the radio communications, none of that was documented in this sheet of paper. Okay. So I can't really talk too much about the harm done, or the potential harm that can be done. But again, I'll leave that for you all to look at if you are interested.
Yeah, if you would like to hand that to Cindy,
I'm
she'll,
leaving 2 copies for you.
yes.
Thank you.
Sure. I guess that's all what I'd like to say.
So just to be clear, your concern is the radio waves from the communication tower?
The communications with the tower itself is not the problem. The tower is a structure. It's the antennas that get from there. These are the ones that send and receive information. They generate what we call electric frequency waves or energy and the electromagnetic energy. And these two radiate. They radiate horizontally and down a little bit. So I just don't want to be influenced or my property affected by being the closest to this tower. So there was a map shown earlier that shows again the service road. This thing in here, there's a service road here. So having it as close as it can get to that road, I think will be cheaper and will solve my problems.
It seems like the tower is it'll be radio waves, but they'll be very low energy. I mean, it's only they're only taking 110 volts. So is that, from your own understanding, that's significant enough to be dangerous? It's 400. It's also 400. I assume it's 420 feet, so that all of the transmitters will be near the top. So it's 420 feet off the ground and very low energy radio. Is that significant enough to be concerned?
I did not do any work because if I knew the frequency of the radio communications, I would have asked it. I'm a civil engineer. I'm not an electrical engineer, nor communications specialist. But my concerns are well documented by several studies in the United States and in other countries.
Okay.
If you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask emergency management representatives to come forward and address the questions that have been raised.
So it is 110 and 240, and I did have a little trouble understanding exactly what the concerns were, but it is 700, 800 megahertz, and then it will have microwave on the site, but the microwave, to my knowledge, the only thing that would radiate anything to the north would be the 700, 800, because the microwave will be going to the east to Glencoe to tie it in with the county system, and then south to City Hall. And then the tower site was picked by Intertech, the exact location for the elevation, for coordination with the FCC, for coordination with the FAA, because it is in relation to the Stillwater Regional Airport. So that tower site was picked very specifically.
The question did come up. What about putting it close to that power station, which is very close and has an access road already?
So let me see if I can go back here. Man, I wish I could show you this. So the power station, the city does not own that property. So the property that is in this image, so north is obviously up. So if you go from where the guide tower is through the trees to the east into that open pasture, Oklahoma Department of Transportation owns that.
Okay.
That's not the city's property. So we were looking at something that we wouldn't have to enter into an agreement with, we wouldn't have to contract with, we wouldn't have to potentially purchase. So the city property was to the west of Kamioka Trail. The substation, he makes a very valid point. We actually looked at this using the substation road, using the substation area to try to access that tower. But what you don't see in this image is at Kamioka Trail right there, there is a large creek that goes underneath, and we would have to build a very large bridge to be able to accommodate vehicles. And then on top of that, we could potentially have vehicles crossing Kamioka Trail while people are walking. So we wanted to be the least intrusive that we could possibly be. So in the end, it made the most sense that we would come south out of Parkview Estates, come down along the edge of Kamioka Trail, and then just taper off to the tower site.
So you
Because we still have to build the concrete approach, we still have to build the access road, we still have to put in the electricity for this, we still have to put in the Hammerhead parking area for the tower site. We still have some work to do on the city side, and you'll be seeing that later.
Thank you for that. Now,
Yes, sir.
on the map we've got, there's an E by the you call it a substation. There's a substation there,
So-
right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the substation then is not city property, it's,
It is. It is.
Okay.
But
there's not enough room there to put the
no,
tower
sir.
right
No,
next to the
for
substation?
So this tower has to have a certain amount of fall zone because of the code, right?
No.
Even though it's designed to fall upon itself and not, ever lay over, it's supposed to collapse within itself. It still doesn't provide us enough room, and the property that we have is just an easement
Okay.
for that property, for that industrial sub.
Well, it wouldn't be great if it fell on a substation.
It would not be, no, sir.
Yeah.
I think that answers the questions that were raised.
Okay.
Did you have another, did we address all of the questions?
Yes and no.
Okay, was there one that we did not? Was there a question we did not address?
Not asking it to be exactly close to the power station so it falls on it, close enough. Okay, why did we choose that particular point? This point is the closest to my residence. Why not take it away a little bit?
Would you demonstrate on here for me where you would like
Okay, this here is your access road, correct?
for this project?
Uh-huh.
No, sir.
No, this is the access road for the power station.
For the industrial sub, yes.
Okay. And in here now, this land is owned by the state. It used to be owned by the city, and the city made
it
a
to the
transaction with the state. Okay, they let the state give them land for the new power station
Yes, sir.
near Jardot, and the city gave them that land.
Right.
So now this land is owned by the state,
Yes, sir.
and it's public land as well. If you approach the state, they will never tell you no. Okay, they are not
I
going
need
to do
to
anything
interrupt.
with it.
This is not the time for really discussion or a debate, but I'm sure staff would happy to answer your questions outside this meeting, and we can arrange for Robert or the right person to contact you.
Thank you very much. All right. If there's no further questions of us, then
No.
I'll turn this back over to
Okay,
Diana.
yes, that would be great.
Thank you.
So at this time, we'd ask that staff come forward to present findings and alternatives.
All right. So, our findings are that Section 23-113.1 of the Stillwater City Code requires that any telecommunication tower in public zoning must obtain a specific use permit. And secondly, there is no intention for the tower to be used for anything other than public safety radio communication services. The alternatives are to, 1, accept the findings and recommend that City Council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented. Secondly, you can find that the specific use permit is not an appropriate use for the property based upon the impacts to the surrounding vicinity, and do not recommend that the City Council approve request. Or thirdly, find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation and table the request to a certain date.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, thoughts?
Well, it seems to me a lot of work was put into choosing the site, and every site is going to have positives and negatives. This seems to be the one with the best balance. very few negatives and a lot of positives. I ride my bike by there quite often. It's going to be right in the middle of this beautiful field, but we do have to have this kind of communication for safety purposes. So you can't put aside places just because they're a pretty view. But it seems like a lot of work has gone into making the preparation for this, and they've done a really good job of selecting site and justifying it.
Yes, I think there's been more than adequate due diligence done on the survey of this site, considerations, and trying to understand what the alternatives and costs of those alternatives are. So I feel comfortable with their assessment.
Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve as submitted. We shall now vote. Motion passes 3-0. The next item on the agenda is the preliminary plat, SUB 20-02.
I'll wait till it quiets down a little bit. All right. Good evening, Planning Commission. Jacqueline Porter presenting this item on behalf of the Planning Department. This is the preliminary plat for Park Valley. Its rough address is 1823 West 26th Avenue. Here's an area view of the subject property. It is near the intersection of Western and 26th and Walnut. Here's an aerial view of the subject property. Fry Farms is to the south, and to the north is Tillridge. Here's a future land use map of the subject property. Future land use map is used to project desired uses in the community at the time of the adoption of the 2030 Comprehensive Plan. During this plan, it was projected to be low-density, single-family residentials. Here's the preliminary plat. I'll give a little history. This item, the preliminary plat, was brought to the Planning Commission on May 12th in 2020. It was approved by the Planning Commission 5-0. Originally, it was 329 lots with 7 outlots. The preliminary plat expired after 2 years from the date of the approved, with no final plat to be filed with the county. The preliminary plat being presented is a revised plat, which has 301 lots and 8 outlots. Improvements from multiple phases are being presented as it is multiple improvements are underway for sections 1, 2, and 3, and the lift station, gravity line, and force main are in the development phases. There are some existing structures not shown on the preliminary plat, for instance, the retaining walls and a few others. There are existing structures not shown there, and a few differences between the preliminary plat and improvement plans regarding the location of utility lines. However, the utilities presented in the improvement plans are located within the easements that are shown on the preliminary plat. Currently, Ideal Homes is working on a clarifying title ownership of the parcel and that make up the current subject property. I think that's all I got. Are there any questions for staff?
It said there were 8 access. Where are the 8 access points on this thing?
It's 8 outlots. So
Outlots or outlets?
Outlots.
Outlots.
Oh, okay. What's an outlot?
It can be various things, usually for detention or ditches, or in one of the cases is a gas line. So there are various uses for the outlots and a water easement as well.
So typically they're noted as outlots. Sometimes when the scale is small, it's hard to see.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I misread that. I read
Yeah.
outlets.
Yeah.
So, they're really packed in, like 50-foot lots. What about drainage what does the city require for drainage for something like this?
They do require a drainage study by engineering standards. They have presented a preliminary drainage study, and as they do their improvements, we will review those with each phase, and they will have to be approved by engineering before we bring the final plats to you.
Okay, so that'll be they don't do that until after the
The
preliminary
final,
plat,
yes.
and then
Well,
they do that.
this one's currently doing some, but it is reviewed by staff of all the drainage per phase. There's a preliminary for the whole site, but it goes more in detail during the improvement phase for each
Okay.
one.
So I don't even know what the city requires. Some places you can't increase the flow off of the flow off the property has to stay the same as it was before. I can't imagine this being the same. But
Correct.
maybe the rules aren't the same. They'll put it in a storm sewer.
Chris, can you answer?
So I think the question that I would ask is, has the drainage study been reviewed by staff at this point?
The preliminary has, I'm not on the deep inside with engineering what they've done for phase 1 and 2 improvements. I'm not sure where they are at on those.
Because all the water is going to go into Stillwater Creek, which floods every 10 years along 12th Street. And all this water is going to go right in there.
So generally, what the goal is that it will slow down the drainage so that the rate of flow slows down and doesn't create an adverse effect downstream.
And there are several retaining walls. Some of them are presented on the preliminary plat, but there are several that are being presented currently that are to help.
So the city will review this to make
Yes,
sure
we
that the
review
floods-
every infrastructure that goes in.
The floods aren't going to get worse because of this.
Yes.
It's
Well,
about 80
hopefully,
acres.
fingers crossed.
Looks like it's about 80 acres. And
Yes, I think it's like 89,
the
79.55 acres.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what it looked like. Right?
Yeah, I was like, nice.
Anyhow, also 300 and some, and then there's just to the south of it is another 80 acres that's getting developed. And I imagine all of those persons are going to go into town along Western.
Yes, there is a future project for Western to be widened. I don't know the timeline on that, but that is in the city's
And it's
to-do
also
list.
been hugely controversial too. There's a lot of people that between 12th and 6th that the
Yes.
city's going to be able to resolve that.
I think so, hopefully, but that will be something we address then.
Okay,
I think that vehicular access has been in the comprehensive plan for quite some time.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
that's been, I think, entered into consideration
Yep.
with reviewing of the comprehensive plan when we've looked at developments.
Yep.
So for
And-
development south of town on Western, they got that all
Yeah,
sorted out.
and with both of these developments that are going in, there was a traffic impact analysis for all of
Mhm.
it. So it determined what needs to be met to provide access for all these people and
So-
flow.
The proposal said there had to be a sidewalk, and that's along Western and 26th. Is that right? The description of it in the pages in the report.
The
So there'd
property,
be a
ha-
sidewalk.
the sidewalks, there are no, there are, sidewalk.
It states
Oh,
that
yeah,
the
it's a
sidewalks are required along Western.
Yes.
Just on Western.
Yep, just on Western.
Okay, kind of a sidewalk to nowhere because it really ends at 26, right?
But I'm sure it will be probably a dual once we start doing the improvements on Western.
Okay, they'll have to cross this. They'll have to cross Western because unless they want to put a sidewalk down the east side of Western. There's already one on the west side, but not on the east
Oh,
side.
Yeah.
But
It'll probably be a major fair, and it may need to have both anyways. It may end up having both since they're going to widen it, I would think. But I'm not on that side.
Any other questions for staff?
So I believe that transportation study was submitted in 2019. And as it is planned here, this is going to be incrementally built. All these lots are not going to be
Correct.
developed at the same time. But is there going to be any further studies on transportation in the near future, so we have a better understanding when there might be a timeline, or what that timeline might be?
I would not know that answer, but engineering would. I can ask them for you.
Okay.
Yeah,
No,
they would
good.
be more apt to answer that for you.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. And I do know, when you mentioned about the number of lots, they did reduce the number of lots from 329 to 301, so there has been some accommodation for that. Anyway, that's all I had.
All right. Thank you, Jacqueline. At this time, we'd like to offer the opportunity for the applicant and/or their representative to come forward and speak tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Anderson with SMC Consulting Engineers. Also have Rylan Reagan with Ideal Homes here. You need to ask a question of him. It was a great report by Jacqueline. We agree with everything that's in the report. One thing that probably wasn't mentioned is that, again, this preliminary plat in its general shape was approved back in 2020, and then the first phase, the first final plat, was actually brought forward and construction plans prepared and approved. That first phase is already under construction. And then last summer in July, or actually probably before that, we actually submitted the first or the second phase final plat, and that's when we were told that this preliminary plat had expired and had to get reapproved. So this is basically a reapproval of a plat that's already been approved and is already well under construction. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. So other than that, I don't have any other comments. And
Thank you. Appreciate that clarification. Did you have a question about maybe how the homes are going to be built? What the plan is, the rate of how quickly they would be built? No?
I don't.
Yes?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
Riley, would you mind coming forward and state your name and address for the record? And if you could just maybe address Commissioner Shanahan's question.
So I'm Rylan Reagan with Ideal Homes. I think our first section is 58 lots, so as soon as we get the improvements in and everything through the city where we can get building permits, we would start probably somewhere around 10 houses and go from there. So I would estimate within 2 years, 2.5 years, the first section will be built out and we'd start on the second section.
And I would just comment that's very similar to what I've seen in other housing developments that Ideal has been involved in. Is it's about 10 homes at a time will go up, and then you'll see kind of a little lull, and then the next 10 will go.
Yep.
So that's
It'll
pretty
be
much
very
what we've seen
similar
in
to
Stillwater.
Teal Ridge, if y'all are familiar with that one, or the canyons.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that. At this time, we'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item. Please come forward. Seeing none, if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in opposition, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Pam Moore. I live at 1123 South Woodcrest in Stillwater. I own some lots. I own I own some lots in Teal Ridge Addition, and until about 6 months ago, for the 10 years prior to that, I lived in Teal Ridge Addition. So my concerns are a couple of them. One is the flooding on 26th Street. I mean, the flood took out the bridge in 2019 on 26th. Hopefully it will handle more water now, but it's flooded multiple times in the 10 years I lived in that neighborhood, where 26 was closed where the bridge is.
Can you bring the microphone just a little?
Okay. And then my other concern is
Thank you.
the traffic. You mentioned the traffic study on Western. I'm concerned about 26th. 26 is a narrow road. It has deep ditches. The roadbed is horrible. It's very wavy. It's full of patches. The intersection of Walnut and 26th right now is pretty much a blind intersection because of where the utility pole sits. You cannot see looking to the west. And then if you go up 26 towards Western, it's a steep hill up to Western, and it's really hard to see either way. And then in the winter, vehicles get stuck there all the time in the ice. So that's just my concern, is the number of traffic that's going to dump onto 26th Street. And I don't know if any improvements are planned on 26. If they are, that's great. But right now, it can't handle the traffic that's on it right now. So that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask if there's anyone else in the audience this evening that would like to speak in opposition. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask staff to return to present findings and alternatives.
All right, the findings. The proposed preliminary plat partially meets the subdivision and zoning requirements due to ongoing building of infrastructure of the improvements. Our comprehensive plan recommends low density use at this location. The proposed density is in alignment with the RSS zoning requirements. Your alternatives for this item is accept findings and approve the proposed preliminary plat as presented, or approve the proposed preliminary plat with conditions, noting that conditions would be met for the approval of the plat. Reject findings and deny the proposed preliminary plat as presented, and find the additional information or discuss is needed prior to making a decision, and table the request to a certain date, noting the action must be taken within 60 days of the public hearing. And staff had a recommendation for a condition on this. Recommendation was to accept the findings of staff and approve the preliminary plat with the condition that the ownership of the property is verified before we present final plats.
Right. Any questions for staff?
If I may, regarding the verification of the property, we've been working with planning, and there's some deed questions we have, and we're working with the applicant on that to get that verified on who the actual record owner is of this property. And that's a requirement of our ordinance, that is actually recorded on the plat correctly. That's why we're requesting that condition is placed. If you do approve the preliminary plat with that condition, it will come back as another preliminary plat before a final plat is presented.
So the way you state that, it sounds like it's necessary to do that.
In my opinion, yes.
So the owner isn't named in here?
It doesn't, I don't want to make it sound like they don't own. Right now, there's some confusion whether two different entities who owns what, but it's still the same persons that are part of that corporations. So we just need to get that verified.
Well, if you can figure it out, great.
We will.
You're in charge.
We will.
They're working. Ideal is working on it, so.
No questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Jacqueline.
Well, it was approved once. It's hard to not approve it again. It might force the city to do some things that it's been working on a long time, like Western. Ever since I've been here, Western's been a pain in the neck to deal with. 4 lanes, and then the issues with 26th. But I don't suspect that involves the builder. That involves the city getting its act together. We just had a nearly $100 million bond issue for schools. This is going to require some more school, but who knows how long it's going to take before it all gets in. But I can't imagine this one and the one south of it going to where Sanger Ridge and Westwood, and it's going to have a big impact on the school district. But that's not our purview. But
No, but we can express concern about that and put it in the minutes.
thank you. Yes.
I think that's been accomplished. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second.
Can we clarify, is the motion to approve as presented or with a condition?
As presented.
Okay, so to clarify, the motion is to accept the findings and approve the preliminary plat as presented, which does not include the condition of ownership.
Well, then I guess I'd ask a clarification from
Right.
our legal advisor.
Do you want to amend your motion?
I can clarify before you make a determination of what your motion is.
I'll amend to whatever you're,
No, I did you have a question? If you don't, that I'll step out.
should we amend?
Staff recommendation at this time is that you accept the findings and approve the preliminary plat with the condition that ownership is verified. Under the alternatives on your packet, there's a staff recommendation. That's what we are recommending.
Well, it seems clear to me then that my motion would be to accept staff's recommendation, accept findings of staff, and approve the preliminary plat with the condition that ownership of the property is verified.
Okay. Is there a second to the amendment?
Revised second, yes.
All right. We have a motion and a second to accept the findings of staff and approve the preliminary plat with the condition that the ownership of the property is verified. We shall now vote. Motion passes 3-0. All right. Back to the fine line. Here we go. The next item on the agenda is the meeting summary for review and possible action for the regular meeting of April 18th. I had one correction, and that would be under public hearing, item 2A, I guess it's to be the third line down, opening the public hearing and asking if anyone would like to speak in favor of the item, where the words none respond after that should be stricken because we did have a response.
Duly noted.
So Chair would move approval of minutes with the correction that was noted. Do I hear a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 3-0. Okay. Next item on the agenda would be miscellaneous items from staff, planning commissioners, or the city attorney for discussion and possible action. One item that we have listed is that the next planning commission meeting will be May 16th. And the last item we have is adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. We are now adjourned.